Mic is on. Excellent. Welcome. Welcome to Second Breakfast. Imagine having a new natural. Let me try that again. Imagine having a supernatural power on your side to help you get through each day. This episode of Second Breakfast is brought to you by your higher power. Your higher power is free and ready to tap into at any time. I use my higher power every day to pray for others and to ask for help. But most of all, I use my higher power to give thanks. You will be amazed at the changes in your life if you allow yourself to use this eternal free service. We will be right back after the intro with quite the show. All right, let's get into it. Get rid of that bird chirp. There we go. All right. So first off, I think we should listen to a UK member. Oh, sorry. I almost forgot my whole intro. Welcome to Second Breakfast. That's fills part of the gap between the no answer period and Blazing Cat for Fridays. We're streaming on 3 platforms: Rumble, X, and YouTube. So please give us a like, share, follow, thumbs up, follow, scare, whatever. You know all that jazz. Comments drive the algorithm when I'm not driving it down with my forbidden words. Appreciate your support. I especially appreciate my subscribers and followers. A few more added. It makes me feel so nice. Thank you so much. It makes it all feel worthwhile. I hope you're already having a wonderful morning and ready to face the day with hope and love of your fellow man, but with everything we need a dose of reality in order to deal properly with things in our lives. So let's listen to Rupert Lowe.
And do you think we've had too much illegal and legal migration? You probably don't.
And let the midges
Do you think we've had too much legal and illegal immigration in the recent past?
This is not about me.
You're not answering the question. You expect me to answer the question. You're not answering them.
Well,
I said what I said because I mean it. And at the end of the day, if you don't think the British people agree with me, then you're wrong, because they do. They've had enough of it. You don't have illegal migrants living next to you, Emily, because you live in a part of the country that probably doesn't have them.
and if you did, you would want them to starve to death.
So you are part of this liberal elite who basically says, do as I say, not as I do. Okay, so I'm sorry. What I meant was, and I mean it, is if our legal system doesn't allow us to detain and deport, we should set up a tented camp on an island. We should not treat them unfairly, but we should equally not put them at the top of waiting lists for dental treatment, for medical treatment. We should not give them spending money. We should not effectively treat them as if they have been taxpayers for years. They haven't been. They are illegal migrants. And by the way, they're not asylum seekers. They're economic migrants, most of them. So I mean, I know the virtue signalling do-gooders want to sort of feel good about themselves, but if you really want to, go and live next to these people. Go and spend your life, and you have them ogling at your children in school and things. No, that's wrong. And what's happened is our state no longer puts the honest, decent, tax-paying British citizen at the top of the agenda. They have been relegated to a second-class citizen, and we are bringing people in here who've contributed nothing, who have come in here illegally, and most of them have been allowed to stay for the simple reason that we're signed up to all these nonsensical international treaties that are meaningless. And why do you think people voted to leave the European Union, Emily? Why do you think they did? Because they want their country back. They want their borders back. They want sanity back. So I'm sorry. Yes, if they want to come here, and if you can't deport them, put them on an island until they ask to go home.
And let the midges.
And who else does that? Australia do that, don't they? Have you heard of Nauru Island in Australia? Does Australia now have a problem with illegal immigration? No. It used to, doesn't now. So I'm afraid sometimes you have to be hard to be kind. And these people will learn very quickly, don't come to the UK. It is not just going to hand out a load of candy to you and let you take priority over the people who've lived here all their lives. British people don't want that. And do you think we've had too much illegal and legal migration? You probably don't.
And let the midges
Do you think we've had too much legal and illegal immigration in the recent past?
This is not about me.
You're not answering the question. You expect me to answer the question. You're not answering them.
Well, one day I'll come on your show, Rupert, and we can do a good interview then.
You can come on my podcast.
That would be lovely. Rupert Lowe.
Same bloody thing happening here in Canada. Same thing. 84 grand per year. That's what these migrants are getting when they come into Canada. What are you getting there, retired, elderly Canadian? Government taking care of you? Nope. No, they're giving tons and loads of cash, boatloads of cash to your replacements. And what are they offering to you? Senior members of the Canadian society? Made. That's what they're offering. Boatloads of cash to your replacements and made for Canadians. That's how you're being treated by the Liberals. Now, I don't know why people are so upset about Cuba running out of fuel because, they have finally reached net zero. Now, yesterday we touched briefly on Jeff Everly, who went into the woods in Nova Scotia when it was illegal to do so because the Nova Scotia elite had waved their magic wand and said, humans are too dangerous and too stupid to understand how nature works, so we must ban them from the woods. Unless, of course, you have a commercial license, then you can do whatever you want. So, this has finally gone to court, and Josh DeHaas here was given a blow-by-blow yesterday. He'll be given another blow-by-blow today as how this case goes forward. So I'm just going to read some of the last entries. There's quite a lot to cover. That's why we're only going to go to very near the end. Now, Everly is now turning to his reasonableness argument. Even if the minister had jurisdiction to issue the ban, the decision itself lacked the hallmarks of reasonableness, transparency, intelligibility, and justification. You start with the written reasons. Everly quotes from Vavilov, reasons that simply repeat statutory language, summarize arguments made, and then state a preemptory conclusion will rarely assist a reviewing court in understanding the rationale underlying a decision. I understand what he says there. Judge asks if this applies to non-adjudicative decisions. Everly says yes. There's a range of types of reasons, but this requirement applies to all decisions. This is a statutory decision maker, so we should have written reasons. We just have news releases and decision requests. Everly argues this is a classic case of just repeating statutory language, summarizing arguments made, and then starting a preemptory conclusion, or, as we like to say, just shouting slogans. Plus the rationale offered in the news releases. These must show justification, transparency, and intelligibility, right? It's the same thing. When they kept saying, the COVID vaccine is safe and effective, they never provided us proof, right? We had to take them on their words. Again, it doesn't meet these standards. The news release says it's extremely dry, so you must stay out of the woods other than for commercial activity. But there is a fatal flaw in the analysis. How can you allow commercial? Emily argues. Judge says it isn't the answer that permits will only be allowed where it's safe. Judge says, but if we restrict people from work, they lose their income, whereas a dog walker does not. So can't the government consider that? Everly says we're talking about whether the ban on travel in the woods is rational, and it's not if it's based on whether it's commercial. Judge asks whether that is not within the government's purview. What? Purview to be irrational? Yeah, we've had a lot of that. Everly says they have to show rationality when they use statutory power, and the statute says it must be necessary for protection of the woods. Minister didn't offer rational explanation for only commercial exemptions, right? And that comes down to it. They're acting like power-hungry totalitarians. They're just saying, no, I decree this. And they're like, well, it doesn't make any sense. Could you explain it? No, I don't have to. Just shut up. Push that person out of the room. We don't want to hear their questions anymore. You're not real press. We don't recognize you as real press. You can't ask that question. That's usually what happens in the far left world. So, more today. We'll see how that progresses in Canada. But if he doesn't win his case, it'll be one more brick in the wall of totalitarian authoritarianism that Canada is falling into. So hopefully this judge will judge judiciously. But speaking of judges, a Liberal-appointed judge described herself as a loudmouth activist for politicians to contend with when she was a lawyer. That says it all. Canadians need judges who apply the law equally, not loudmouth activists creating leniency for non-citizens. Let us listen to this. So I do have a clip of him from, do I have this? I had a clip last week. No, I don't have that one up here. But he did bring this up on Friday in question period, that he was putting this bill forward. And part of this bill, of course, is that murderers be given parole boards every 5 years as opposed to every year in order not to re-victimize the victims. They have to reappear every year to say that, yeah, this murderer who victimized me needs to stay in prison because I don't believe he should be out because he's a murderer. So he's saying enough of re-victimizing the victims. Let's make it every 5 years. That's one part of his bill. But of course, he's discussing more things here. So let's listen to him.
I talked earlier about activist judges. And I just want to highlight this one example, Mr. Speaker, that really describes the problem. I'm reading from an article from the National Post, and I just wanted to read a couple of things out of it. In 2013, Toronto lawyer Avi Yayago described herself as a loudmouth activist for politicians to contend with. And this person was very, very aggressive in providing leniency to people who were not citizens of Canada. And this government, in their wisdom, decided to make her a federal court judge in 2021. So guess what? She has done incredible things to halt revocation proceedings against people that maybe should be going. There's been all kinds of things that she has done to provide leniency through her court. And at the very end, it says, decisions in the last year alone show a pattern of leniency for rule breakers, country shoppers. Each instance takes state capacity away from cases that truly matter. And I think there's many examples we can think of that. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to conclude by saying this bill, C-220, is a good bill. It fixes a major gap that we have in our system. And it's a wonderful, simple bill that I support wholeheartedly. And I would implore all members to pass this bill when it comes to voting. Thank you.
But if only the judiciary fuckery that we are exposed to ended there, but it does not. This is from the Supreme Court of Canada Chief Justice. In his interview with Le Devoir, Wagner characterized the protest on Wellington Street, where Parliament and the Supreme Court are located, as the beginning of anarchy where some people have decided to take other citizens hostage. That's a Supreme Court judge's opinion on the freedom protest, right? The article reports Wagner as having declared that the forced blows against the state, justice, and democratic institutions like the one delivered by protesters should be denounced with force by all figures of power in the country. Now, this is a judge here who's coming down on the side of the Liberals, who illegally invoked the Emergencies Act to use violence against peaceful protesters who all they wanted was bodily autonomy and not be forced into a fraudulent, injurious, and known deadly injection, of which the records now have recently been sealed for 15 years by the same government that is now appealing the last ruling that says you invoke the Emergencies Act illegally. Can't make this stuff up. His words reflect the government's position that the protest was beyond the bounds of civilized behavior and was properly crushed with state force. The question is not whether his views are correct, but whether they are premature and in the wrong forum. Should any of the Emergencies Act challenges make their way to the Supreme Court, which as of yesterday they now have, the Chief Justice will sit in judgment on a dispute about which he appears to have already formed an opinion. Doesn't look good, folks. Having made his public comments, the Chief Justice could announce that he will recuse himself from the case to avoid a reasonable perception of bias. However, Wagner is not merely one of many federally appointed judges, but the Chief Justice of the highest court in the land. His opinion carries influence that cannot be nullified by simple recusal. The harm done to judicial impartiality on the issue of the invocation of the Emergencies Act cannot easily be remedied. This is from an article by Bruce Party, of which we covered yesterday here, when he was talking about how Daniel Smith will sabotage the upcoming referendum on Alberta independence. So, but there's more. Of course, there's more. So, Holly Dean says, not included in the link story here, what we saw on Wellington Street here was the beginning of anarchy, where certain people decided to take other citizens hostage to take the law to their own hands. Of course, now quoting Richard Wagner. Remark prompted complaint by 13 lawyers of the Canadian Judicial Council. So, other lawyers have recognized that Liberals are fucking around with our legal system by appointing radicals. Radicals that other lawyers are saying, hey, what the hell's going on here in Canada with all these crazy judges? But it doesn't end there. Breaking, of course, Christian Van Gyn. We've received the news that the Carney government is appealing the Emergencies Act decision. Today was their deadline. They filed it at the absolute last moment. And we were ready. We are prepared to defend our victory that found the Emergencies Act was used unlawfully and the regulations were unconstitutional, should the Supreme Court grant leave. Now, what does this do? Well, what it does do is it now confirms the absolute link between Carney and Justin Trudeau. Now, we know Carney was in the back rooms fully supporting the invocation of the Emergencies Act. There was even some back and forth texting, maybe even some emails saying, yeah, let's have at her. He was all for confiscating those bank accounts, seizing money illegally, further abusing Canadians with their mandates, using every tool at their disposal to coerce Canadians into an injection they didn't want. Well, now he's forever aligned himself with the Trudeau era. Because he's saying, yes, I agree that use of violence on peaceful protesters was the right thing to do. Coercing people through violence to take an injection to keep their jobs was the right thing to do. Yes. Because now that Carney has hidden the COVID-19 vaccine harms and injuries records for 15 years, because, they need to hide their crimes against humanity, they're now doubling down on the violent portion of those crimes where they violently suppressed people protesting their crimes against humanity that they are trying to hide. Now, of course, this could all go sideways if these appointed judges by the Liberals, of which there are more now in the Supreme Court than there were appointed by the Conservatives, if they decide to ignore the justice system that we have, because the arguments that the lawyers have made are very sound, and that there's no way the court can overturn this if they follow the law. But if they do an ideological interpretation in the same way that the Liberals did an ideological interpretation of the CSIS Act in order to conflate peaceful protest with economic disruption, therefore equaling violence, therefore I could use violence. It's the same stupid argument that these National Socialists do, that say that hurtful words are violence, therefore I can use violence against you. Yeah, that's the world we're living in now. If you don't believe me, let's move on to the next story. Now, we know what they're doing with Bill C-9. Let's listen to this brave fella here, because apparently he's going to be posting stuff every day and drawing attention to himself because he believes in freedom of religion. Let's listen to what he says. Maybe with some sound.
1922, and it went absolutely viral. It racked up over 270,000 views in under 24 hours. And here's the tweet that got absolutely everyone riled up. Leviticus 18:22. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination. Over 17,000 likes, hundreds of replies, and it sparked a massive debate. But is this verse really illegal under new Canadian laws? Today we're diving deep into the controversial Bill C-9 and what it means for religious freedom in Canada. Now, if you're passionate about Christ, his law, and personal freedom, stick around and don't forget to hit the subscribe and like button below. Let's start with the tweet itself. I posted this as day one to highlight a growing concern. I'm going to post this every day for as long as it takes until C9 is done. In Canada, where I unfortunately live in this time, laws are shifting in ways that could criminalize sharing certain Bible truths. Leviticus 18:22 obviously comes from the Old Testament and is part of God's moral law given to the Israelites. Now, in context, it's addressing the sexual immorality of homosexuality, and it's emphasizing holiness and separation from pagan practices. It's not about hating people. This verse isn't about hate. It's the same idea as you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not bear false witness. It's not a hatred to point people in the right direction in terms of morality. It's honoring God's design for humanity. So what happened here? Why?
And that really is the nub of it. Is moral guidance. 10 Commandments, New Testament, moral guidance, Old Testament, different moral guidance. Either way, it's moral guidance, right? No one in Canada was ever thrown off a roof because of Christian moral guidance. But people were thrown off the top of roofs for moral guidance in Gaza. And what religion were they following there? They weren't following Christianity. And that is the distinction that the far left liberal mind does not seem to understand because they have no morals, right? For them, it's ideology. If you don't conform to the ideology, you're bad because they have no concept of morality. Because for them, morality is something ever shifting for them to control, for them to use to control people into doing what they want. So one thing is good one day, the next day it'll be bad because they will just change the rules because none of it is based on any real principles other than keeping them in power. It's nothing to do with making sure that Canadians can live a hopeful and fruitful life. It has everything to do with maintaining power. And they do this by controlling what you say and what you can think, right? Because now you're going to self-censor yourself before you even say it. Because you will think, oh my goodness, am I going to be in trouble for what I'm going to say? That's where they want you. They want you constantly afraid. They want you a victim without making you understand that you're being a victim of their idiocy, their laws, their totalitarianism, their authoritarianism, their constant control mechanisms of brainwashing you every single day. Explosive testimony out of Ottawa has shown that BC research directed by senior government officials to destroy decades of addiction research after presenting findings that didn't align with the NDP's approach. For years, we've been told these policies were evidence-based, but what happens when the evidence doesn't support the ideology? A decade into this crisis, we're losing 5 people every single day. We cannot afford to keep getting this wrong. Again, it's the far-left ideology. They do not care about human life. Everything about them is building their giant mountain of skulls for them to sit atop of and count their money. Count the money that they're stealing from other people. Because everything they run on socially is based on other people's money. The same people that they are slowly putting to sleep forever on the streets with their harm reduction. The official record says Canada sees explosion in gender studies degrees as math-heavy disciplines lose appeal. Yes, we see that in Canada, the math scores are, well, they're declining. They're going way down deep in a dumpster because what's happening in the sciences is that they are also being infected with this socialist ideology. If you go to any universities and you look at their curriculums, it's now mandatory for you to take these non-science other courses to keep those other departments running, the ones that are now brainwashing people from the top down. Now, this is just not only happening in universities. They've been brainwashing kids for over a decade, decades now, in the lower schools. Now, some of those, they're all adults now, and they all have anxiety over climate. Some of them are becoming adults, and they're believing in this gender ideology issue. Confuses them all because they're controlling them through feelings. A new report suggests there may be a surprise correlation between Canada's shifting education trends and its latest polling numbers. Despite raising cost of living pressures, recent polls show strong support for Prime Minister Mark Carney. The result, some analysts say, doesn't quite add up. According to researchers, the answer may lie in a broader national shift away from math-heavy disciplines. The report, published by the Institute of Educational Trends and Outcomes, shows a sharp increase in gender studies enrollment over the past decade, alongside a steady decline in fields like engineering, physics, and computer science. Researchers describe the trend as quantitative avoidance, with many students opting out of programs that require advanced math. We're not suggesting causation, said lead author Dr. Elaine Mercer, but there is a noticeable correlation between declining engagement with math and a growing tendency to accept numbers without deeper scrutiny. One senior education advisor offered a more direct explanation. At a certain point, numbers stop being about accuracy and start being about how they make you feel. Right now, these polls feel very correct. It's all about feelings. It's not about facts. Expert note, the interpreting polling data requires understanding margins of error, sampling methods, and statistical contexts, skills more commonly developed in quantitative fields. As fewer people engage with math at that level, it may change how those numbers are perceived, said policy analyst Mark Delaney. Now, the report concludes that while the numbers themselves haven't changed, how Canadians interpret them might be, raising new questions about the intersection of education, data, and public opinion. Here's that bloody word again, intersection. Yes, the cultural Marxists love to use that word. Now, I guess we're seeing the true cause of this intersection they wanted all along. They are finally seeing the fruits of generational brainwashing. All these students that the young cultural Marxists who now feel it's good that Mark Carney is prime minister because it makes them feel good, while every other financial mathematical indicator says the opposite. Right? Reality is not something liberals can deal with. So they have to base everything on feelings, because look at this. It happened again, says Elon Musk. Breaking: William Kelso Flournoy, a man pretending to be a woman, was arrested in Washington state after he allegedly sexually assaulted a young infant girl. Why does this keep happening? Because of feelings over facts. And feelings over facts is now enshrined in government policy. Here you have your government website, Women and Gender Equality Canada. Why do liberals disrespect women? Why do they have to lump them in with their 56 genders of the 2S LGBTQI communities and all their fantasy and made-up things? Why are women so deeply disrespected by liberals? Why do so many women vote liberal when you are completely disrespected by them? They don't even respect you as a woman. They have to lump you in into gender equality. Why is that? Because men are evil. Yes, white men are evil. All white men must die. White men are evil. They're the oppressors. You're a victim. That's the entire liberal line. Because why would men be excluded? Oh, well, I guess you can be included if you just change your gender. It's always about labels. It's always about divisions. It's always about making some people more equal than others. That's how the liberals operate. Merritt Stiles here on Doug Ford. He says he's obsessed with Toronto. I can't disagree. But he keeps forgetting he's premier of the entire province while he's busy drawing up plans for Fantasy Island. Stiblane! Irv Velichez, was that his name? Anyways, showing my age. A new convention center, and even adding jets. People in Northern Ontario are just asking for one thing: fix a single highway. No one in Northern Ontario asked for a luxury spa or a new island in downtown Toronto. They're asking for safer roads, so no more lives are lost. I grew up in Northern Quebec. The first 12 years of my life, I grew up in Rouyn-Noranda, 30 miles from the Ontario border. My maternal grandparents, lived in Kirkland Lake. It's just another 30 miles into the border. My paternal grandparents lived in Sturgeon Falls, which is another 3 hours further into Ontario. We had family in the Tri-Town area, in Thornlow, in New Liskeard, all parts of North Bay. So quite well traveled throughout Northern Ontario, and I can tell you the roads there have always sucked. Always horrible, poor maintenance. After every winter, I mean, it takes them the entire summer just to try to fix what they can on their limited budget until the winter hits again, destroys all the roads. Anyone who's driven Highway 11 up north, oh my God, take your life into your own hands. But then, of course, I traveled it when I was younger because I was just so few years out of the infantry and recently into the Air Force, young gun full of cum, just ready to take on any challenge. I didn't care if I broke down on the road. I was okay. But it's quite the range, quite the load, and the roads are just horrible, absolutely horrible up there. But, that's Northern Ontario is often ignored. Look at how long it has taken to do any kind of development up there. Now, of course, they're all in a panic. Oh, we need those minerals up north. Bring a fire. Let's build a road. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, fine. Meanwhile, how about all the residents there? All the residents there for decades who have been just scrambling for what few jobs that there are, very few development. And of course, it's hard to get development if the bloody roads are horrible. Let's listen to her.
So obsessed with Toronto. I just spent almost a week up in Northern Ontario on the roads fighting for safe highways for Northerners. We lost another life just a few days ago. People are dying every day on the highways in the north, and this premier cannot stop talking about Toronto, and he just wants to put more jets in there. He wants to build an island convention center. God knows what he's going to come up with next. When I'm on the road, what people are telling me is this does not reflect our reality. This does not reflect our priorities. We would like him to just fix one road in Northern Ontario. Just fix one road in Northern Ontario before he starts talking about jets at the Island Airport. Doug Ford, every time, look, he's so obsessed with.
Well, what's old Dougie up to? Well, Dougie's taking a lesson from the Liberals. You know why? Because Doug's not a conservative. He's a progressive. That's right. You cannot be a progressive and a conservative at the same time. It's like being a liberal conservative. It's an oxymoron. The two things just don't add up. Well, so Rebel News, of course, is taking them to task.
For years, Ontarians have relied on one crucial tool to hold power accountable: freedom of information. It may not be glamorous and it's not necessarily loud, but it's one of the few ways ordinary people, journalists, researchers, and citizens can look behind the curtain of government decisions. But the Ford government is trying to take this all away. So in this report, I'm going to tell you exactly what this means and how you can help fight back. Let's dig in.
Premier, what does the, as you put it, communist Chinese have to do with you wanting to keep your cabinet documents secret?
That's a very small part of it. Cybersecurity is a massive issue. This legislation is 40 years old. This is about the broader public service. We're doing great work, research in universities. We have health records. And we have to keep an eye on our adversaries, be it China, North Korea, Russia. And if anyone thinks that...
So that is the first thing that they always go to, right? When they want to hide stuff from you, oh, it's for your safety, right? And then of course, when that's blown away, they start thinking that, well, maybe Maybe it's for something else. Maybe you're just trying to hide stuff. Yeah, no. You see, I do a lot of calls with my constituents, and I don't want their information to be exposed. That's privacy. Privacy. No, buddy. So first off, if you're doing government business on your private phone, you shouldn't have been doing that, right? You should have been using your government phone. That's what we pay you for. The fact that you're doing business on your private phone, business that includes spending taxpayer money, that should be illegal. Well, that means you're hiding something, right? Open the bloody books. It's been a theme now, constantly. I was stating it again yesterday. Open the bloody books. Open the books. If you have nothing to hide, open the books. That's all we want. Open the book. You are an open book. You are paid by the taxpayer. Therefore, everything you do should be available to be scrutinized by the taxpayer, right? It has nothing to do with security. Let the police decide what's secure or not. Every single thing that you spend money on, public should needs to know how you came to that decision and who's getting the money and why those decisions were made. This secrecy is just the whole point, where absolute power corrupts absolutely. And he's just taking the same pages from the liberals who want to hide things from you and continue to, and have been hiding things from you for the past 10, 11 years. And this guy's doing the same bloody thing. We have no conservative government in Ontario. We have progressives who are enriching themselves and their friends, which is all they ever do. They have a tendency to be corrupt, more corrupt than all the other politicians. And the evidence shows that all politicians, every time a party gets into power, they eventually come down because of corruption. It's just that some are more corrupt than others. So it's always a matter of like picking the lesser of the two evils. Meanwhile, Ryan Garrettson writes, does anyone else realize what an unbelievable psyop we are under with this government? It's actually frightening and exhausting. We are bombarded repeatedly with messaging like this, and it's true. Every time we turn around, Mark Carney's always saying, Canada has what the world wants. And this is repeated by his ministers as well. We're securing record levels of new international investment in Canadian resources. I'm starting to sound like a Ferengi. Businesses and Canadian workers. Yeah. So just this constant propaganda, when in fact we've done sweet FA. They have no deals whatsoever. Meanwhile, Sean Fraser, he's boasting Canada's becoming a global destination for space launch right here in Nova Scotia. So we covered this yesterday. Throwing away $200 million investment, ensuring a sovereign access to space and creates good-paying jobs at homes. Now, so this is just throwing money, basically, at a company to keep them from going bankrupt. Now, here's Synth writes, harsh reality of Spaceport Nova Scotian Maritime Launch Services is that it is yet another classic case of Canadian industrial policy chasing a dream in a brutally competitive global space sector, with taxpayers fronting most of the risk while private shareholders and insiders, liberal insiders, pocket any upside if things somehow work out, which they won't. Right? Well, there's existing systems out there. Stop wasting money. Well, of course, they're not going to stop. It's just money going out the window to their friends where we will never see anything launched. And if there is something launched, guess what? It's not going to be launching from Canada. They're going to have to piggyback on SpaceX or some other launch vehicle because Canada has no space industry. Canada has a government industry. That is all. That's all Canada has. It has a shrinking taxpayer base as more and more people leave the country and lose their jobs, and a massive increase in government workers that now, well, basically pays for most of the people in this country. We're at that point now where the country is just about to flip into complete depression because there's far too many people working for the government and nobody here working on their own in private industry, funding the government. And while that's happening, we're just printing boatloads of cash. Give $200 million to these guys to do nothing except fill their own pockets. Oh yes, we're going to spill the space. Oh BS! How long has this industry been working in Canada? Have they made anything? Have they accomplished anything? Nope. Oh, yes, they have. Sorry. They've accomplished getting more money from the government. That's about the only progress they've made. Now, Rosemary Barton from the CBC, oh, she misses her buddy. She misses her buddy. Yeah. See you soon, she says, Cochrane. And where's Cochrane? Well, he's been on sick leave, right? He says he's paused his social media hiatus to dispel the speculation surrounding his ongoing absence from the show. And the speculation is that he went on sick leave right after a CBC insider exposed them all for the corrupt bullshitters that they are. And of course, he doesn't dispel any rumors here. He doesn't say anything at all. He doesn't say why he's on sick leave. You know, he's just, oh, come back soon. Yeah, come back soon. Okay. Vesper says, did anybody else know that Andrew Coyne's cousin, Deborah Coyne, had a child out of wedlock with Pierre Elliott Trudeau? This guy is one of the most Trump derangement syndrome folks we have in our government-funded media. Yes. Andrew Coyne, when I say government-funded media, I do mean government-funded media, right? Quality Canadian Journalism Organization, funding every media organization that qualifies for this. And in order to qualify for this, you have to be selected by a liberal appointed board that decides if you're liberal enough in your news to be considered worthy of these tax credits that gives 27 to 30 grand per employee per year in your organization in order for you to keep pumping out liberal propaganda, which this guy does in spades. Oh, yeah. But of course, we know why now. He's got family ties to the Trudeaus. So every time you see Andrew Coyne's head explode online or in a newspaper, if he's printed something, know that he is very, very deeply involved in the liberal machinations. Now, here's a quick little piece. There's been a lot of speculation online that perhaps Benjamin Netanyahu is no longer on this planet. So let's see what the kerfuffle is.
To see more people talk about it, but I didn't want to run with it. I didn't have any information, but I thought it was very weird that we hadn't seen anything from him. Now take a look at this. This says, can anybody explain to me how this is an AI? I've never seen a face morph like that in one frame. They just can't get it right, can they? So take a look. Look at his face. Let me just... Are you guys seeing how it morphs? So they're walking in. And then look how it's like the facial expression, his face transforms. It like it shape shifts right there. There's another close-up of it. That's not normal. That's impossible for a person's face to do that. So AI detectors, people have been running it through AI detectors and all of that, and it is showing that it is AI, and you can see that with your naked eye. This doesn't look right, and Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't quite look like himself as well. That's been pointed out. Look at that.
So why would the government be hiding the health state of their prime minister? If it's true at all, this is not the only person. There's been several other videos, all of them debunked as being AI, where they're trying to show that Netanyahu is alive. So, more to follow up on that, I guess. Meanwhile, Jeffrey Rath writes, breaking, if anyone had any doubt about Communist Carney's plans were for the Alberta oil patch, read this, a text from Albertan concerned about armed Chinese operators in the Alberta oil patch. Thank you again for this very informative talk last night. He says, so anyways, he goes, I hauled a load of drilling mud from southern Alberta to a PetroChina location just north of Fort McMurray. Upon getting on location, we had to be escorted to where we were to unload. We were only allowed outside the truck to untie the load. They had personnel to guide the loader that was unloading me, which I thought was very strange, as it's never done on any other location. While looking around, I see 3 armed guards around a location, kind of staying to the shadows and not coming into the right lights very much. When I was done unloading, I asked our escort why, and he just said they're with PetroChina, and don't ask anymore. Having served, I did know they were carrying fully automatic AK-47s with what looked like minimum 30-round clips. Any questions, please feel free to ask or call if you want a quicker reply. Says thanks anyway. So this was picked up. This story was picked up. Here it is on the Western Sentinel. Armed agents seen as Chinese energy project in northern Alberta. Now, think about these banned assault rifles. They're banned. So why are there Chinese, obviously Chinese people, I don't know if they're Canadian citizens or not, but they're carrying banned assault weapons in northern Alberta, and you have people delivering things there, and they're basically telling him, controlling him like the entire place is a prison camp. Like, oh, don't get out of your truck! Like, very, very suspicious, high security. What the hell is going on? The driver said 3 armed guards remained in shadowed areas, right? And of course, here's a little bit more. This video here by Redvox TV, it's AI slop, but they have taken out this interview here.
The driver said 3 armed guards remained in shadowed areas. When he asked his escort about them, he was told they were with PetroChina and not to ask any further questions. Citing his military service, the driver identified the firearms as automatic AK-47 assault rifles with what appeared to be at least 30-round magazines.
The government's non-response to this report is its own scandal. No company statement, no federal minister at a podium saying the RCMP is on it. No acknowledgement that what was described, if accurate, would represent a straightforward violation of Canadian law at a site sitting inside the country's most strategically important energy corridor. Ottawa went quiet.
So my wonder is, will this be asked in question period? Will this be brought up in Parliament? I don't know. There's so many things that need to be brought up in Parliament, but they never are. Well, what they do bring up in question period seems to be the same questions over and over and over again for political reasons, to try to get that message out into the public sphere, right? And to get people out there thinking about that, about what the Liberals are doing. They figured if you repeat it often enough, it might get through. No. They're not watching question period anyway. They're going to get the one snippet from that one question. When you keep asking the same question over and over again, you're missing the opportunity to ask every one of these other questions on every one of these other chaotic things that the Liberals have allowed to occur in Canada. Canadians really need to know about. Like this. Like, this should be front page news. But it ain't. Chinese AK-47 swaggering guards at a facility in Canada, treating the area like a prison camp. This ain't looking good. It's basically, are they foreign troops? Have the Liberals allowed foreign troops into our country? Is that what they've done? Because we've seen it before. We've seen where they allowed Chinese troops to train in Petawawa. So, Chinese masters, that's all the Liberals ever want. They want to be your master because they have a master. See, people who are independent, people who believe in freedom, believe in proper governance, right? Want other people to be left alone because they want to be left alone. They don't want a master. Liberals want to be your master because they have a master, a Chinese master. Now, of course, the master has told them, our Canadian master has told his minions that, Brookfield's in trouble in Ukraine, and we need to deploy more weapons platforms in order to retrieve those Brookfield assets. Let's listen to David over at Moose on a Loose.
Well, we've got David McGinty here, posted by Wiretap here, saying, claims they are rearming and reinvesting in the CAF by announcing the donation of 400 state-of-the-art armored vehicles to Ukraine. Now, I reposted this and I said, why would we be sending all of our state-of-the-art armored vehicles to Ukraine? Don't we need to defend ourselves against the Americans and Donald Trump, who's going to be stealing our water and our land? Of course, that's nonsense. They're sending those vehicles to Ukraine so Ukraine can recapture the ZNPP nuclear reactors. There's 6 of them in the south there, the largest nuclear power plant in Ukraine that Russia has currently captured, that Russia is restarting, and that Brookfield has the uranium contracts for, which is bad for Mark Carney's carried interest on his Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1. That's why they're sending our armored vehicles over there.
Canada has sent a lot of equipment over there. I'm surprised that they haven't sent any planes yet. I mean, that'll be the real kick in the teeth right there. Most Canadians just don't have any connection, like that they can even mentally think of when it comes to the equipment that Canadian Armed Forces uses on the ground. Because it's just stuff they don't see or deal with every day, or have probably ever even understood or dealt with in their entire life. Armored equipment, tanks, armored personnel carriers, weapons, equipment that we use as combat troops in the field. All those little things, right? All those little things that you need to arm your military with for your own nation. And what are they doing? They're using your tax dollars to purchase it, and then they are giving it away. Giving it away. Basically, it's in-your-face money laundering. I think David explains it well, why we were sending all our stuff there, $22 billion. Does that $22 billion include all this free equipment that we're sending them as well? We're never going to get any of that back. It's done. Once it goes into theater, forget about it. Forget about it. Now, of course, all that fuckery that's going on in the Liberal government, then and a Carney going everywhere, and then it seems that Brookfield always seems to profit, but that's not going unnoticed, right? It's not just Moose on a Loose David that has been pointing this out on his massive moose chart. Other people are noticing, right? India, Carney trip, February, March 2026, uranium supply deal of $2.6 billion with Cameco, Brookfield's long-term nuclear Westinghouse partner. Plus SEPA negotiations, right? Brookfield's $12 billion green energy announcement. Pattern. Major investments news precedes trip. Here we have a Carney trip. Qatar. Pattern. Announcement immediately pre-trip AI trade talks align with what happened here with Brookfield. $20 billion AI JV announcement. The Singapore trip. What happened here? Let's see. Carney trip investment trade. Brookfield's first RE entry of May 2025. Follow-on logistics in 2025. December pattern match. Expansion in 2025. Bills to around Asian region trips. South Korea. Pattern Tech. Another one. Where Brookfield industrial gas semiconductor acquisition. Why are Canadians so blind to the massive ethics violations that Liberals continue to do over and 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 non-stop ethics violations? Why? Because they believe little twerps like François Philippe Champagne. Mr. Speaker, good news! Please see my statement on our progress combating money laundering, he says. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we've covered about what FinTrack wants to do, which is basically it's just going to be getting into people's faces that are not criminals. Homeowners, right? Who are now going to move money in purchasing a home are not going to be subject to FinTrack investigations when they're not criminals. Now, of course, they're announcing this because it's for your safety. For your safety, we're going to fight the criminals, right? Except the biggest criminals are the ones that are in government, because we still have no foreign registry, right? Or mechanisms to open up the government books to expose where all the money laundering is going on in government and find out where all the missing $1 trillion have gone to. You know, that massive $1 trillion debt hole that we have with nothing to show for it? The fact that the Liberals have spent more money than all other prior governments combined? Where's all that money going? Where's all that money laundering going? But no. For Philippe Champagne, it's money laundering is a serious crime that threatens the integrity of Canada's financial system. Our government takes this seriously. That's why Track Canada's Financial Intelligence Unit is strengthening enforcement and increasing transparency on compliance actions. They just won't be looking into the Liberal government's abuse of other people's money. That would be outside their purview because they work for the Liberals. Right? That means that anybody who questions Liberal money laundering will probably be subjected to FinTrack. Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms writes, among the many concerning elements of Bill C-22, the legislation introduces mandatory metadata retention for all Canadians. Now, we covered this Bill C-22 yesterday. There was a breakdown by Michael Geist. Now, of course, Justice Center for Constitution, there are aspects of this bill that are still concerning. As they say, this means telecom and internet providers could be forced to store information about who you communicate with, when, and even where you are up for to a year, even when there are no grounds to suspect that a person has been or is involved in criminal activity. Right? So again, this is imposing the will of the government upon private industry to do something that is going to cost them more money. And where do you think who's going to pay for that cost? That's right, it's going to be you, Canada. You are going to pay more for your services in Canada if they need to comply with these bloody rules. Because everything the Liberals do is not to help you, it's to enrich themselves and their friends, and to make life more difficult for you and to control you more. Canadians should contact their MP to express opposition to Bill C-22 and these broad, mandatory surveillance measures. They're off this week. Call your MPs. Tell them to stop the BS with Bill C-9. Tell them to stop the BS with Bill C-22. And it's not the only two bills they've got coming forward. It's a non-stop fire hose of chaos to keep Canadians feeling good about themselves. Like, oh, I can't be concerned with all these other things that might make me feel bad. I don't want to look at that. I want to talk about that. I need to feel good. I feel good. And speaking of feeling good, it's something that Mark Miller will never do when it comes to anybody who's ideologically opposed to him, because he keeps throwing examples out there of how much of a fat house, pedantic little child that he is. Nothing much worse than an annoying man at the bar in St. Patrick's, he writes. Annoying man. That's how he describes the leader of the opposition. Good thing most Canadian cities have more than one Irish pub. Mark, you moron. Do you know how many restaurants are going to close this year because of your fiscal incompetence, because of what you've done to this country? They're saying about 6,000 more restaurants easily are going to shut down this year. That's it, they're done. And people can't afford to go out, let alone to a pub. So you've killed pubs in Canada. I mean, look at this pub, looks pretty empty to me. Saw the St. Patrick's Day parades out there. They're pretty pitiful. Hardly anybody out there. Except, of course, when they need to put a sniper up on the rooftops to ensure that no weird immigrant is going to come in, cause chaos during a parade that's happened in Canada for decades and decades. Right, Mark Miller, what kind of person is he? Well, let's go back down memory lane here, right? Mark Miller's tough guy act is getting old. It's clear that he acts that way because he has no idea what he's doing. Now, this is back in November of 2024 when he was immigration minister, this clown.
Your plan calls for a cap on international students, 485,000 2024, 437,000 2025. There's been adjustments to those. So obviously there's a discrepancy between the two. So how many do you project will leave the country then at the end of December 2025? All 766,000? What's the proportion? What are the forecasts the department has?
You'll have to be clear on that. A discrepancy between what and what?
Between the number of people who will be allowed into the country and then the number of people who will be on a study permit that's expiring. So those who are expiring the end of December 2025, how many of them will actually leave? Are you saying 100% will be expected to leave, or are you going to send CBSA to chase all 766,000?
You know that is not what happens. There are a number of things that occur. Some people actually get renewals. Some people get postgraduate work.
Yeah, well, we know exactly what happened. They didn't do anything. They did tweet FA. They did nothing. In fact, the government has repeatedly said they expect them to leave. They're not going to force them to leave. They just expect them to leave. In fact, they don't really expect them to leave, because as soon as they get their majority, what they are going to do is they're going to grant them citizenship. All of them. Oh, yeah. Of course, they're all going to vote Liberal because they're going to, hey, you gave me citizenship. I'm going to vote for you. And then Canada will be toast and done for. You will really be able to stick a fork in our butts and turn us over because we will be completely done. Here's some more Mark Miller. Now, this is from November 2025, a year after that prior statement, right? And here he is, thinking that he's done a grand job as immigration minister.
The Prime Minister, and I got into politics. I said, just let me, I didn't ask him for a job. None of us are in the position to ask the Prime Minister for jobs, but I said, just allow me to make a difference, and this is going to allow me to, in shaping how Canada and the future of Canada looks like. And that is through immigration, an open, just, and compassionate immigration system that has become a characteristic of our government, but is frankly characteristic of all Canadians that have big hearts and want to open up the Canada to the world. You know, when I asked the Prime Minister, and I
No. We didn't ask to open up Canada to the world. That was your idea, right? We didn't ask you to impoverish Canadians by having to subsidize immigrants by 85 grand a year while our own citizens starve at the food banks, where you celebrate having to do National Socialist band-aids like food stamps and dental, brag about giving lunches to children in school because their parents can no longer afford to give them lunches. Canada, wake the hell up. You're being taken over by idiots and communists. Sask writer Gal writes, a Canadian veteran has uncovered a horrifying truth about Canada's medical assistance in dying. Now, this is not new information, folks. What is being sold as compassionate care is, according to expert testimony, a chemical drowning. Kelsey Sharon reveals the shocking details from a Senate subcommittee hearing featuring the testimony of a 25-year veteran anesthesiologist. The core of the issue is the drug sodium thiopental. Here's the breakdown. The source: the drug is made in Italy under EU law. It is illegal to manufacture a drug for use used for executions. The demand: Canada and the U.S. have been using it for death penalties and MAID, leading to a shortage for anesthesiologists who need it for surgeries. Wow. So we're actually impacting healthcare in order to, off people. The mechanism: a Freedom of Information requests that and analysis of over 300 autopsies of individuals executed with this drug revealed a terrifying fact. 85% showed a 2 times increase of water in the lungs. Now, again, these were not the ones that were mated. These were ones that were executed by death penalty using the same drug that they want to use to maid you. This means the drug induces death akin to waterboarding or drowning. Yeah. Not just typical of the far left. They're pushing MAID as healthcare. They're pushing death as healthcare, right? Because they have no respect for human life. And we can see here that they're probably reveling secretly behind, oh my goodness, we're just torturing these people and they're going through misery and the last little hours of life when we're getting all that negative energy. Because apparently that's what the Liberals eat on. They're like energy vampires. And they have to have a lot of evil around them for them to propagate, like killing people. So why do MAID deaths appear peaceful? Because patients are given a paralytic first. They are chemically paralyzed, then administered the drug and begin to drown to death internally, unable to move or cry out. There's just not enough levels of hell that liberals have to go through when eventually they shuffle off this mortal coil, like we all eventually will do. Because nobody gets out alive, right, folks? We're born and then we die. And what we do in between is what we will answer for in our last hours, in our last seconds, in our last microseconds of existence. And if you don't believe that you have to answer for that at the end of your life, fine, that's good for you. But I do know that what happens in your mind is affected by what you do. And if you can live with that, if you can live with the fact that people are being tortured to death, then you're probably a psychopath. So why do MAID deaths appear peaceful? The procedures take 10 to 15 minutes via IV and up to 24 hours if taken orally, all while the person is consciously drowning. Some deaths have taken a week. We waterboarded terrorists and called it cruel and unusual punishment. Now the Canadian government and Dying with Dignity are offering it to its citizens as compassion. This is the same slippery slope history warned us about. Yeah, mountain of skulls, folks. Echoing the verbiage and expansion of categories seen in the darkest chapters of human history, it's now being offered to veterans instead of treatment. Cost-saving measure disguised as empathy. That's how you want to treat your seniors and veterans, Canada. This is how liberals are doing it. They don't care about you. They don't care about human life. The truth is being hidden. Families like one in Fraser Health are being denied autopsies. The public is being lied to. Oh, great. Denying an autopsy to the family. You know, it's evil always gets stronger in darkness, and that is why they need to hide all their evil that they do, like denying an autopsy. This isn't compassion, it's brutal, concealed execution. It's time to talk about what MAID really is. And it's fascinating because every once in a while, and of course Kelsey is like the primary person online for this right now, there's a big voice out there, and whenever people go after her, oh, she just destroys them. She actually had another video yesterday. She destroyed one of these people because they have no clue. They think it's peaceful. Oh, it's a peaceful death. So, St. Rev Dr. Rev here says, enraged for the millionth time that 2010 era search is dead because the engines have been painstakingly focused on serving retarded people. So you see a specific and rare search item, they assume you're misspelling something common. What am I talking about? This is the last story for the day. You ever done a search on a search engine, you misspell something, and right away Google says, oh, did you mean this? And you're like, oh yeah, sorry, I misspelled that. However, sometimes you actually go out of your way to spell something very specific. And you do a search on it, and the search comes back and says, oh, you must have meant this, and then it gives you a search on that. And you're like, well, no. So then you put it in quotation marks, so like search this. And it still comes back with a search of what you're not looking for because it thinks you misspelled the word. What do I end up doing? I go to the search engines. Most often, I go to X. I'll put it in the X search engine, and I'll usually find what I'm looking for because all the main search engines out there are slowly trying to hide everything from you. They're slowly erasing the past. There was that part in 1984 where the main character, Smith, is doing his job, which is basically rewriting history. Slowly erasing things from past newspapers and just rewriting history. This is what they're doing right here. It's digital book burning. It's digital revisionism. And it's also in alignment with what libraries are doing out there because they are getting rid of books as well that are not compatible with the far left ideology. So we are slowly turning into a fascist society by the National Socialist Liberal Party, and they have been working very hard. They've been following this plan, and it's a global plan, right? Because we can see the same things happening in the UK, the same things happening in New Zealand, the same thing happening in Australia. All these same areas being influenced by the same world body. The proof is all around us, folks. I'm not lying. The evidence is right there for you to see. And the biggest evidence of all is this giant, massive hole in our debt and the nonstop spending by the people who apparently have our best interest at heart. What we know is the complete opposite, because everything they do seems to enrich themselves and make the rest of us poor. And by the way, April 1st coming up, so your taxes are going to increase. This has been Second Breakfast, for probably the longest Second Breakfast show I've ever done. We will see you tomorrow for our next Second Breakfast, and after that, there will be another video, I'm sure. There was one that came out yesterday. Need more views on that. Thanks a lot, folks. Thanks for coming out. Thanks again to all my followers and subscribers. I really appreciate you. I appreciate anyone who's watched this video, and especially if you're even here at the end. Most people don't watch videos to the end. So we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.